Class reunion. The campus heartthrob often joked by calling my girlfriend baby, and my girlfriend never rejected it. On the contrary, she gladly accepted it, looking as if she enjoyed every second. Even afterward, on WeChat, she chatted with him in the same way. My reminders were useless, so I directly announced a breakup. My girlfriend was dumbfounded, just because someone jokingly called me baby. You're breaking up with me over that? I nodded. Unexpectedly, after the breakup, she cried with regret. Chapter 1, Baby, Breakup. Jack, are you insane? Just because Jonathan called me baby as a joke, you're really breaking up with me for that? Juliet's breath caught. She asked in disbelief. I nodded. Looking at her angry expression, I couldn't help but recall everything that happened tonight, 2 hours earlier. Inside the private room of the class reunion, the air was still filled with noisy laughter and the clinking of glasses. I was sitting in the corner, fingertips tapping lightly on the rim of my glass, my cold gaze fixed on Juliet. Not far away, Jonathan, the campus heartthrob back in college, was holding a glass of wine, wearing his usual frivolous smile. As he walked up to Juliet, his arm naturally rested on the back of her chair. Baby, you look amazing tonight. This outfit really brings out your glow. He leaned down slightly, deliberately lowering his voice, laced with teasing ambiguity. Instead of moving away, Juliet covered her mouth with a laugh, her eyes tilting upward flirtatiously, her tone playful. Oh, Jonathan, stop calling me that. Her voice was neither loud nor soft, just enough for a few people nearby to hear, which immediately drew a round of teasing laughter. Jonathan raised his brows smugly, his fingers even giving her shoulder a light squeeze, while Juliet, my girlfriend, only smiled and brushed his hand away, without giving the slightest clear rejection. My fingers froze on the glass, and my gaze turned ice cold. This wasn't the first time. In their WeChat chats, Jonathan had called her baby more than once, and her replies were always along the lines of all right or don't tease, sometimes even accompanied by affectionate stickers. I had reminded her before, but she always brushed it off with, he's just joking. He calls everyone that. Don't be so sensitive. Sensitive? Ha. After the party, I silently drove Juliet home. The car was filled with suffocating silence, broken only by the mechanical voice of the GPS. Juliet seemed to sense something was wrong. She turned to glance at me, speaking casually. What's wrong? You didn't have fun tonight? I didn't answer. When the car stopped under her building, I killed the engine, fingers resting on the steering wheel as I stared straight ahead. Juliet, I said calmly. She was still lowering her head, rummaging through her bag. Let's break up. Juliet froze. Slowly, she lifted her head, her pupils dilating, as though she hadn't heard clearly. What? I turned my face, repeating word by word. I said, let's break up, and that led to the scene at the beginning. Now, watching her anger and confusion, I gave a cold laugh, pulled out my phone, opened WeChat, and brought up her chat with Jonathan, shoving the screen right in front of her. A joke. How many times has he called you that? And which time did you ever refuse? Juliet's face turned pale, instinctively defending herself. That's just how he is. He calls everyone that. Why are you so petty? After all these years together, you're breaking up with me over something this trivial. I pulled my phone back, my eyes growing completely cold. Everyone. Then do the other girls also laugh like you? Fluttering with joy, looking like they can't wait to throw themselves at him. I sneered. Juliet, don't insult my intelligence, and don't insult the word relationship. I reached over, swiftly unfastened her seatbelt. Enjoying ambiguous flirting may be your choice, but my bottom line will not be trampled. My voice was icy. Get out. Juliet's face flushed red instantly, a mix of shame and fury. She shoved the door open, her high heels striking the ground hard. Turning back, she glared at me. Jack, you'll regret this. I didn't even spare her another glance. Stepping hard on the accelerator, I drove away without hesitation. Juliet stood there, chest heaving violently, fingers clutching her bag strap. Maybe she still thought I was just jealous, that in a few days I'd surely come back, begging her. But she was wrong. This time, I meant it. Chapter 2, just for this. When I got home, I immediately muted my phone and threw it on the sofa. I didn't need to look at it to know that Juliet must be bombarding me with messages and calls right now, trying to use her usual theories of making a big deal out of nothing and being overly possessive to convince me, or more accurately, to convince herself that I was just throwing a tantrum and would apologize in a few days. But unfortunately, this time she was completely wrong. I poured myself a glass of ice water and stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, coldly gazing at the night view outside. Scenes from the evening's reunion flashed in my mind. Jonathan's hand resting on the back of her chair, her eyes curving with laughter, and that playful, "Oh, you're calling me that again." A wave of disgust rose in my chest. I should have broken up with her long ago. From the very first time I saw Jonathan call her baby on WeChat, and she responded with a giggly emoji. I should have told her to leave, but I gave her a chance, reminding her to set boundaries, and she just brushed it off, saying I was overthinking. Juliet stood by the door, her fingers trembling as she typed message after message. Jack, what do you mean? You're breaking up with me over a nickname. Jonathan just likes to joke around, you know that. Yuri being so childish. A string of red exclamation marks soon appeared in front of the messages. She had been blocked. Juliet's breath caught, and she immediately called me. But all she heard was a cold tone. The user you're trying to reach is temporarily unavailable. He actually blocked me. She almost threw her phone in anger, her chest heaving, her mind buzzing. She couldn't believe Jack would be so heartless. They'd been together for 3 years, and Jack had always been the one to tolerate her. She was willful, and he'd indulge her. She'd throw a tantrum, and he'd endure it. When she liked something, he'd buy it for her without a second thought. She had long gotten used to Jack's indulgence and even thought that no matter what she did, he would eventually give in. But this time, he actually broke up with her because of a trivial joke. He must be overreacting with jealousy. Juliet bit her nails and paced back and forth in the living room. Yeah, he's just mad. He'll regret it in a couple of days. The more she thought about it, the more convinced she became, even starting to plan how to teach him a lesson. When Jack came back to apologize, at the very least, he'd have to buy her a new purse as compensation. The next morning, I went straight to the office. As usual, my assistant Alex brought me coffee and today's schedule. I glanced at it and said lightly, postpone tonight's dinner. Alex was taken aback. But sir, tonight is a dinner with Chairman Wong. We've tried to schedule it a few times already. Postpone it. I didn't even look up. Just tell them I have personal matters. Alex didn't dare ask any further and nodded, leaving. I leaned back in my chair, rubbing my temples. Personal matters. I just didn't want anyone to notice that something was off with me, although I was the one who initiated the breakup. 3 years of feelings weren't fake, and the frustration in my chest wouldn't go away. But I knew clearly, this frustration wasn't because I was reluctant, but because I was disgusted with my own indecision. I should have ended it sooner. The first time she ignored Jonathan's overstep, I should have told her to leave. All day long, Juliet's phone screen lit up and then went dark, lit up and went dark again. She checked WeChat every few minutes, afraid she'd miss Jack's regretful message, but the chat window remained empty. Not even a friend request. He really isn't talking to me. She bit her lip, her heart starting to panic. Her best friend messaged her, so, have you made up yet? Juliet forced herself to reply nonchalantly, he's still mad, but don't worry, he won't last 3 days. After sending that, she inexplicably felt a little uneasy. Jack was never the type to sulk. He was always decisive, firm in his words and actions, whether it was work or relationships. The thought crossed her mind, and she shuddered. At 9 p.m., I returned home. As soon as I opened the door, I smelled a familiar perfume. I frowned and immediately switched on the living room lights. Juliet was sitting on the sofa, her eyes red, clearly having just cried. How did you get in? I asked coldly. She stood up, her voice choked with sobs. Jack, can we talk? Leave. Just 5 minutes. She rushed over to grab my hand. I didn't realize you'd care so much. I won't let Jonathan call me that anymore. I promise. I sidestepped her touch and walked straight to the door, pulling it open. Juliet, don't make me say it again. Her face turned pale instantly. Juliet stood in the hallway, staring at the door that slammed shut in front of her, feeling as if she had fallen into an ice cave. It was only at that moment that she finally realized. Jack was serious. He really didn't want her anymore. Chapter 3, Cutting Ties Completely. After Juliet left, I looked around the living room. Her scent still lingered in the air, sickeningly sweet to the point of being nauseating. I walked over and opened all the windows, letting the night breeze flood in and disperse the smell. Turning, I entered my study, opened my computer, logged into WeChat on the web, and opened the chat history with Juliet. My fingers slid across the touchpad, scrolling back page after page. Jonathan's baby appeared so often that it was glaring. Baby, are you coming to the weekend party? Juliet replied with a cat nodding emoji. Baby, the lipstick you recommended looks really good. Juliet replied with hee hee. I'll buy it for you next time. There were even more explicit ones. Baby, your skirt is so short tonight. Aren't you worried your boyfriend will get jealous? She replied. He doesn't care about these things. I took screenshots of the 10 worst ones, packed them into a zip file, and sent them to Juliet's email. The subject line simply read, look for yourself. Take care. Then, I blocked all her contact details, WeChat, phone number, Alipay, even music app friends. Finally, I opened Weibo and removed the account I had secretly followed for 3 years. After all of this, I leaned back in my chair and exhaled deeply. The world was finally quiet. Juliet sat in the taxi when her phone suddenly vibrated. She scrambled to pull it out and saw the email notification. It was from Jack. He couldn't have let go after all. As she clicked open the attachment, her smile froze. There were over 10 screenshots of chats, all conversations between her and Jonathan. The playful banter she had once thought was no big deal, the flirtation she had assumed was just jokes between friends, were now laid bare in front of her. Each message felt like a slap in the face. The one that made her shiver the most was the last image. It was a message Jonathan had sent before last night's party. Baby, dress nicely tonight. I brought you a gift. Her reply had been, what gift? I'm looking forward to it. The taxi suddenly slammed on the brakes, and Juliet almost collided with the front seat. The driver cursed and swerved, but she felt like all her strength had drained from her body, and she collapsed into the seat. Her fingers trembled as she opened WeChat and messaged her best friend, I think Jack is serious. As soon as the message was sent, a notification popped up. The other person has turned on friend verification. You are not their friend. Juliet was stunned. She quickly opened her contacts and realized that even her best friend had removed her. Then she remembered, this best friend worked in Jack's company's finance department. That evening, after I finished my shower, I saw I had several missed calls, all from unfamiliar numbers. I immediately switched to Do Not Disturb mode. On the nightstand, there was a contract I needed to sign tomorrow. When I flipped it open to double-check the terms, a photo slipped out from the folder. It was from when I took Juliet skiing in Hokkaido last winter. She was wearing a white down jacket, her nose red from the cold, leaning against my chest, smiling. I stared at the photo for 2 seconds, then tore it in half and threw it in the trash. As I turned to turn off the light, the moonlight filtered through the gap in the curtains and fell directly on the torn photo. In the dark, I closed my eyes for a moment. 3 years of love ended. Chapter 4, He Can't Live Without Me. At 7 a.m., I walked into the company building on time. In the elevator, I ran into Zoe from the finance department. She hesitated, casting several glances at me, before finally speaking up when the elevator reached the 28th floor. Sir, Juliet called me over 20 times last night. I didn't look up, just block her. But she kept crying, saying you misunderstood her. I finally raised my eyes, my gaze resting on Zoe's face for a second. Are you close to her? Zoe immediately shook her head. Just a regular classmate. I'll delete all her contact details right now. The elevator doors opened, and I stepped out, hearing Zoe frantically scrambling with her phone behind me. After the meeting at noon, my assistant told me that Miss Mu had been waiting at the front desk for 2 hours. I glanced at the surveillance screen. Juliet, wearing the Chanel outfit I gave her last month, was wiping her tears in front of the receptionist. Call security. 3 minutes later, my phone lit up. It was a multimedia message from an unknown number, a picture of a pregnancy test stick with the caption, Jack, I'm pregnant. We need to talk. I stared at the photo for 3 seconds and then forwarded it to the head of the company's legal department. Falsifying medical records for blackmail. Report it to the police. Juliet rushed into the coffee shop with dark circles under her eyes, where her group of friends was already waiting. Juliet, over here. Abigail waved. Juliet sat down with a thud, slamming her bag onto the chair. I'm so mad. Jack actually blocked me. The 3 friends exchanged glances. Iris cautiously asked, is it really because Jonathan called you baby? Yeah. Juliet grabbed Abigail's iced Americano and gulped it down. He's making a big deal out of nothing. Jonathan just likes to joke around. He calls everyone that. So why should I break up with him because of that? Iris hesitated. But, if my boyfriend was called baby by someone else, I'd probably. That's not the same. Juliet interrupted her. Jack is always so busy with work. If it weren't for Jonathan constantly asking me out, I'd be suffocating. He doesn't even appreciate it and gets jealous. So childish. Abigail rolled her eyes. Honestly, it might be better this way. Jack is great, but he's too controlling. Look at Jonathan, handsome, fun, and his family owns a chain of hotels. Juliet's eyes lit up, but then her face dropped. But Jack bought me bags and jewelry. Oh, he'll regret it, Abigail said confidently. When he comes back begging for reconciliation, make sure he buys you the latest Hermes collection. Juliet finally smiled and pulled out her phone to open her shopping cart. Let me start picking. A while later, Juliet Mu was sitting in the mediation room at the police station, her face pale. The officer pushed a pregnancy test verification report in front of her. The supermarket surveillance shows you bought this earlier today, and the time of use was within 2 hours. Miss Mu, this is a criminal offense. I was just joking. Her voice trembled. Mr. Jack reserves the right to pursue legal action. The officer closed the folder. Sign here and you can leave. As Juliet walked out of the police station, her legs felt weak. She shakily pulled out her phone and saw a flood of messages popping up. Her university class group was blowing up. Someone posted a video, Jonathan at a bar, with his arms around 2 girls, calling one baby and the other darling. The comment section was filled with mockery. I sent this Juliet's good friend. I heard Jack broke up with her because of this. Ha ha ha. He really thinks he's the campus heartthrob. Juliet's vision blurred, and she almost collapsed on the street. Chapter 5, Entanglement. At 6 in the morning, my biological clock woke me right on time. It was pouring outside. While I stood by the floor-to-ceiling window stretching, I noticed a familiar figure downstairs. Juliet, holding a flimsy umbrella that looked like it might collapse any second, was staring up toward my floor. I pulled the curtains shut and turned to the kitchen to make breakfast. As the eggs sizzled in the pan, my phone buzzed. It was a message from property management. Mr. Jack, that lady has been standing at the building entrance all night. Should we call the police? I replied, no need. She won't last through today. Sure enough, when I went downstairs in a suit and tie, Juliet was already gone. At noon, while dining with a client at a Michelin restaurant, the manager came over quietly. Sir, there's a Miss Moo insisting on seeing you. I looked toward the entrance. Juliet, wearing a wrinkled blouse, was being held back by 2 waiters. The moment she saw me, she shouted, Jack, I was wrong. Please give me another chance. Everyone in the restaurant turned their eyes toward us. I excused myself to the client, pardon me, walking to the door. Juliet immediately grabbed my sleeve. I know I was wrong. I'll never talk to Jonathan again. Look, she fumbled with her phone. I've already blocked him. I slowly pulled my sleeve out of her grip. Miss Moo, you're disturbing my meal. Tears welled up in her eyes instantly. You can't be this heartless. I've been with you for 3 years. So what? I said flatly. The moment you enjoyed Jonathan calling you baby, we were finished. But there's really nothing between Jonathan and me, she argued. I never betrayed you. Emotional betrayal doesn't count as cheating. I looked at her coldly. Hearing the so-called campus heartthrob call you baby over and over, don't tell me you didn't feel anything. Juliet froze, wanting to defend herself, but in the end, she staggered away. That evening, when I returned home, I found a paper bag hanging from the doorknob. Inside was the Chanel jacket stained with rust, along with a crumpled note. Everything you gave me, I'm returning. I tossed the entire bag straight into the trash. Just as I was about to enter, the elevator chimed open. Movers carried several large boxes out. The long empty luxury apartment across the hall finally had a new owner. A woman in a white suit was directing them. Hang this painting in the study. Be careful. She turned and noticed me, nodding politely. Hello, I'm Helen, just moving in. I'm Jack. I extended my hand. Need a hand? Meanwhile, Juliet was drenched, crammed inside the subway, her high heels landing in a puddle of unknown filth. It was the first time in 3 years she had taken public transport. Before, Jack always drove her, or at the very least booked her a car. Now, staring at the ride-hailing app showing peak surcharge 8x, she gritted her teeth and chose the subway. Move. A burly man shoved past, and Juliet's Chanel jacket brushed against a rusty railing. She gasped, my jacket. Annoyed glances were thrown her way. Someone muttered, must be fake. No one wearing real Chanel would take the subway. Juliet tightened her grip on the strap above her. When she stumbled out of the subway, her phone rang. It was her landlord, Miss Moo. The rent will increase by 10% next quarter. Give me your answer by tomorrow. Standing under the blazing sun, she suddenly felt dizzy. Passing a shopping mall, she caught her reflection in the window, makeup smudged, hair greasy, sleeves stained with subway grime. On the glass, the reflection overlapped with the ad screen playing finance news. Rising tech star Jack selected as Young Entrepreneur of the Year. On screen, Jack stood in a sharp suit, calm and confident under the flashing lights. Juliet suddenly realized, the Jack who always had breakfast ready for her, who solved all her problems, who tolerated all her whims, would never return. That night, curled up on the bed in her rented apartment, Juliet scrolled endlessly through her photo album. Every picture was with Jack, in the Maldives scuba diving, kissing under the Eiffel Tower in Paris, skiing in Hokkaido. In every photo, Jack's gaze toward her was so tender it could melt ice. She suddenly realized, her phone didn't have a single photo with Jonathan. Fireworks crackled outside. Juliet looked toward the night sky as tears finally spilled over. She finally understood. Those unspoken flirtations, those coy little games, those clever tricks she thought were harmless. This was the price. Chapter 6, A New Dawn. On a weekend morning, I was woken up by the sound of the doorbell. Through the peephole, I saw Helen standing outside, holding 2 cups of coffee. She wasn't in a suit today, just a simple white t-shirt and jeans, her hair casually tied back into a ponytail. Sorry to bother you. She handed me a cup. My coffee machine broke down. I just moved in 3 days ago. Could I borrow yours? I nodded and stepped aside to let her in. As she walked past me, there was a faint citrus scent around her. Not the cloying sweetness of perfume, more like the clean fragrance of shampoo. In the kitchen, Helen skillfully worked the coffee machine, then suddenly spoke, your ex-girlfriend stood downstairs until midnight last night. I raised an eyebrow. You know her. I saw her waiting for you, so I guessed. She handed me an espresso. When she left, she threw a bag into the trash. I took a sip of the coffee. It was unexpectedly good. Curious what it was. Helen blinked playfully. So I checked. It was a bunch of luxury packaging boxes, with receipts inside, all purchased within the past 2 weeks, after your breakup. I let out a cold laugh. Juliet was still the same, thinking maxing out her credit card would soften me. On Monday morning, during the weekly meeting as the marketing team reported quarterly figures, my phone buzzed. From Juliet, I'm downstairs at your office. The guards won't let me in. I deleted the message immediately and gestured for the report to continue. 5 minutes later, the front desk called. Sir, Miss Mu said, if you don't come down, she'll stay at the door indefinitely. I sneered. Ignore her. Let's see how long she lasts. The conference room fell into dead silence. Everyone kept their heads down, pretending not to hear. After the meeting, the head of legal lingered. Sir, if she keeps showing up every day, should we call the police? No need. I gathered the documents. She won't last the month. That night, after working late until 10, Juliet suddenly rushed out and clung tightly to me. I'm sorry, darling. I was wrong. I shoved her away at once. You're not sorry because you realized your mistake. You're sorry because you can't live the way you used to anymore. With that, I walked away without looking back. When I got home, I found Helen picking up a delivery. Midnight snack again. I glanced at the fried chicken bag in her hand. She shook a beer can with a grin. The acquisition deal went through. Celebration. By the way, she suddenly leaned closer and sniffed. You smell like a woman's perfume. I instinctively stepped back. My ex came to cause trouble. I lifted my sleeve to sniff and immediately remembered Juliet throwing herself at me earlier. Could just that brief hug have left a scent? What is this woman, a bloodhound? Need help? Helen raised an eyebrow. I'm good at pretending to be a new girlfriend. No need. I pulled out my keys. She's already out of moves. Chapter 7, Abyss of Regret. Juliet stared at the numbers on the ATM screen, her fingers trembling. Balance, 7,328.56. This card, which once always had a 6-figure balance, now only carried the deposits from her own salary. Her phone kept flashing with credit card bill reminders, the total already exceeding 100,000. Miss, are you going to finish your transaction or not? The person in line behind her urged impatiently. Juliet hastily removed the card, and as she turned, she bumped into a pregnant woman. The woman let out an ouch, and Juliet quickly apologized, only to realize it was her former private yoga instructor. Miss Mu, the trainer looked at her in shock, taking in her bare face and haggard appearance. Why didn't you come to class last month? Juliet forced a smile. I've been busy lately, but Mr. Jack prepaid for a whole year of lessons. The trainer lowered her voice. Is it because you didn't show up that he came last week and requested a refund? Juliet's vision went black. The next day, Juliet stood inside a luxury resale shop, watching the appraiser critically examine her handbags. This patent leather one has scratches. I can only give you 20,000. 20,000. Juliet shrieked. I paid 48,000 for it, and I only used it once. The appraiser shrugged. That's just the second-hand market. Do you want to sell it or not? Juliet bit her lip and nodded. When she walked out of the store, her Hermes bag had turned into a bank transfer on her phone. As she passed the mall's giant screen, it was playing Jack's exclusive interview. We expect to achieve 200% growth this year. On the screen, Jack appeared calm and confident, while Juliet clutched her phone so tightly her palms were slick with sweat. Late at night, Juliet curled up on the sofa, scrolling through job listings. Suddenly, her phone lit up with a message from Jonathan. Baby, heard you're single now. Let's grab a drink. She stared at the message for a long time, then suddenly grabbed the phone and hurled it against the wall. The sound of the shattering screen echoed as she finally broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. Outside, the billboard on the opposite building lit up with a giant recruitment ad from Jack's company, annual salary in the millions, seeking the most outstanding talent. Those shining words struck her like a resounding slap to the face. Chapter 8, Clash in the Workplace. At 7 in the morning, I stood in the shower, letting the hot water wash away the last traces of fatigue. In the mirror, I shaved clean, straightened my tie, and casually picked up my phone for a glance. 3 unread messages, all work-related. Juliet's name hadn't appeared in the notification bar for a long time. I let out a short laugh and slipped the phone into my suit pocket. When the elevator doors opened, Helen was already inside. Today, she wore a dark gray suit, her hair neatly tied up, eyes fixed on the financial news on her tablet. Hearing movement, she looked up and gave me a small nod. Morning. I stood beside her, noticing her screen displaying my company's stock price chart. So interested in my company? She chuckled lightly. Always got to keep an eye on the competition. As the elevator descended, she suddenly remarked, You're on the cover of Business Weekly today. They took a good shot. I raised a brow. You bought it. 20 copies. Her tone was calm. Planning to hand one to each investor, so they'll see the caliber of the partner I've chosen. When the elevator reached the first floor, the doors opened slowly. I stepped aside to let her go first. That confident our cooperation will succeed. She glanced back at me, her eyes shining faintly in the morning light. I never do anything I'm not sure of. That evening, after working overtime until 9, I stepped out of the elevator and found Helen pacing at my door. Forgot your keys? I asked. She shook the file bag in her hand. There's a loophole in the merger deal. Wanted to discuss it with you. I opened the door to let her in. She walked toward the study with familiarity, but suddenly paused by the trash bin in the entryway, half a Chanel coat sleeve sticking out. Your ex's. Helen gave me a thoughtful look, then suddenly smiled. Jack, you know what I admire most about you? I raised a brow. Waiting. Decisiveness. She pulled out the file and handed it to me. Like this contract, once you found a problem, you had it redrafted right away. No compromise. I took the file, my fingertips brushing against hers accidentally. Her hand was warm and dry, no cloying perfume, no stickiness. Outside, the city lights glittered. Somewhere out there, Juliet was probably staring blankly at her empty bank account, and I suddenly realized I hadn't thought about her for an entire week. Chapter 9, Baby, break a leg. At noon, during my break, I was chatting with the executives in my office when Zoe suddenly barged in, her expression odd as she handed me a phone. Sir, you might want to see this. On the screen was a group chat from our university classmates. The latest post was a photo of Jonathan lying in a hospital bed, his right leg in a cast. Captioned, "Take it easy, brothers. I really screwed up this time." Expressionless, I scrolled through the messages, reading the backstory. Last Friday night, Jonathan couldn't keep his mouth shut at a bar. He shouted "baby" 3 times at the girlfriend of a vice president from a tech company, who threw a drink in his face on the spot. That VP, a retired Special Forces soldier, cornered Jonathan in the parking lot afterward. Word was Jonathan's tibia was broken, 3 months minimum in bed. The office fell into dead silence. I handed the phone back to Zoe. He brought it on himself. An old staff member from legal leaned over. Sir, should we take this chance to sue Jonathan for harassment, considering those chat records with Miss Moo? No need. I straightened my files. No point stabbing a corpse. That evening, on my way home, I ran into Helen in the elevator. She was holding the latest issue of Financial Figures. Guess who I saw today? She opened the magazine, pointing to an interview. George from Pluto Tech, the guy who broke Jonathan's leg. I glanced at the photo. You know him? Classmate. She chuckled. He said he'd cover Jonathan's medical expenses. The condition, that the brat avoids women altogether in the future. When the elevator reached the first floor, we walked side by side toward the parking lot. The night breeze carried the faint scent of cedar from her. I suddenly asked, what would you do if someone called you baby? Helen paused, turned to look at me. First drink in his face, second one down his pants. Her eyes narrowed. Why? You want to try it, boss? I laughed under my breath and held the car door open for her. Let me give you a ride. Meanwhile, Juliet sat staring at a job posting on her computer. MT Tech is hiring a marketing director. Annual salary, $800K, 2M. It was Jack's company. On impulse, she clicked apply. The system autofilled her resume. Her last job, 3 years ago, CEO's girlfriend. Panicking, she quickly closed the page, only to hear her coworker exclaim behind her, "Oh my God, look at Jonathan's new post." Her phone buzzed madly. In the university group, someone had shared Jonathan's latest update. He was in the hospital bed, flashing a peace sign, captioned, "Legs healing. Thanks for the love, babies." The comments section was pure ridicule. Still hitting unmarried women. Which bone will you break this time? LOL. Does he still think he's the campus heartthrob? Juliet's chest tightened. She could barely breathe. The chat was blowing up. Breaking news. The guy who hit him was George from Pluto Tech. Serves him right. Heard that guy used to be Special Forces. Jonathan really hit a wall this time. The girls from Wall Street. The most suffocating was the video below. In the dim bar, Jonathan leaned toward a short-haired woman with a sleazy grin. "Baby, drinking so slow, waiting for me to feed you." The next second, she grabbed her glass and splashed it in his face. A low, cold male voice came from off-camera. "Who the hell are you calling baby?" Juliet suddenly remembered the reunion half a year ago, when Jonathan had draped his arm over her shoulder, calling her baby. And she had laughed and swatted his hand away. Jack had been sitting right across, his gaze icy cold. Her phone buzzed again. A message from her friend. See the group chat. "Now do you understand why Jack broke up with you?" Juliet bit her lip hard. At dawn, Juliet curled on the sofa as Jack's interview replayed on TV. In terms of business management, I believe a bottom-line mindset is crucial. On screen, Jack, in a sharp suit, spoke calmly. It's the same with relationships. Once a red line is crossed, there's no turning back. The host joked, "We hear you're still single. Are your standards too high?" He smiled faintly. "I simply know what I want." Juliet abruptly switched off the TV. In the darkness, she finally cried, not out of indignation, not out of anger, but from complete and utter regret. At last, she understood, the moment Jack stood up and walked away from that reunion in silence. He had already given her his final mercy, and Jonathan's leg in a cast. That was the price that should have been paid long ago. Chapter 10, Belated Realization. I was jolted awake by the vibration of my phone. On the screen, more than a dozen text messages from the same unfamiliar number. I didn't open them, but the notification bar already showed part of the content. Jack. I saw the video of Jonathan getting beaten up. I finally realized how disgusting I was back then. I was wrong. Really wrong. I put my phone on silent, turned over, and went back to sleep. At 6, when I got up for my morning run, that number called 3 more times. I pressed the answer button, and Juliet's hoarse voice came through. "Jack, can we?" "No." I hung up and immediately blocked the number. In the community garden, Helen was stretching. Today she was wearing a black sports tank top, and the sweat on the back of her neck shimmered in the morning light. "Morning." She didn't turn her head. "Your phone's been buzzing non-stop." I stepped onto the treadmill beside her. "Ex-girlfriend." Helen chuckled. "Looks like Jonathan's broken leg hit her pretty hard." I adjusted the treadmill's incline. "Do you think belated realizations mean anything?" She pressed the speed-up button, her ponytail flying behind her. "Of course, they make the ones who made mistakes live in even more pain." Juliet stared at her disconnected phone, tears falling hard onto the screen. She pulled up the last photo in her album with Jack. On her birthday last year, he was holding a cake. Eyes so gentle they made her heart tremble. What wish had she made back then? Something like, "May we always be this happy." How ironic. Her finger slid through her contacts, and almost against her will, she dialed Jonathan's number. It rang for a long time before being picked up. An impatient voice came through. "Who is it?" "It's me, Juliet." Jonathan's tone suddenly turned mocking. "What? Jack doesn't want you anymore?" Her grip tightened on the phone. "Why did you always call me baby back then?" There was silence on the other end. Then suddenly an outburst of laughter. "You're not telling me you're only asking this now because it was fun. I wanted to see if Jack's girlfriend was easy to flirt with. Turns out just calling you baby twice made you blush, and I figured maybe sending you a red envelope would be enough to get you out." Juliet slammed the call shut. At 10 in the morning, the receptionist informed me that a Ms. was downstairs, saying she had something important to return to me. Let her wait. It wasn't until after lunch break that I went down by elevator. Sure enough, Juliet was still in the lobby, holding a cardboard box in her arms. 3 months without seeing her. She was so thin she looked almost like a different person, dark circles heavy under her eyes. When she saw me, she stumbled forward. These are all the things you gave me." I glanced at the box. Watches, jewelry, handbags. "No need to return them." I pressed the elevator button. "Throw them away." She suddenly grabbed my sleeve. "Jack, if I had rejected Jonathan right away back then, there's no if." I pulled my arm free. "Just like Jonathan's leg, once it's broken, it's broken." The elevator doors closed slowly. The last thing I saw was her collapsing to the ground. Juliet stood in front of the trash station clutching that box of luxury goods, suddenly remembering the first time she had received a gift from Jack. Back then, fresh out of college, she had cried and laughed at the same time when she received her very first Hermes. Jack had rubbed her hair and said, "There will be more in the future." And now, with her own hands, she threw all those more into the trash bin. Her phone buzzed. It was the landlord's final warning. "If you don't pay the rent tomorrow, move out." She squatted by the roadside, checking every single bank card balance. Together they still weren't enough to cover 1 month's rent. In the distance, the LED screen on a skyscraper was playing an ad for Jack's company, the voiceover powerful, MT technology, redefining the future. Juliet finally broke down in sobs. She finally understood. What she had lost was not just the infinitely tolerant boyfriend, but also the only person in her life who had truly loved her. And all of this, just because of a few frivolous words, baby. Chapter 11, The Road to Rebirth. Juliet crouched in the back alley of an office building, her fingers trembling as she scrolled through job listings. Juliet. She looked up and saw the shocked face of her college classmate, Abigail. The other woman was dressed in a professional suit, an MT Technology employee badge pinned to her chest. You work at Jack's company." Juliet hurriedly stood up, patting down the wrinkles on her crumpled dress. Abigail nodded awkwardly. "Marketing assistant." She lowered her voice. "You shouldn't be waiting here. The CEO gave strict orders last week. If anyone sees you, they're to call security immediately." Juliet's nails dug into her palms. How is he doing lately?" Yesterday he just closed a deal with ByteDance. At the celebration banquet, Abigail suddenly stopped talking. What about the banquet? Abigail sighed. One of the new interns accidentally spilled wine on the CEO. He just laughed and said it was fine. If it had been back then, you would have thrown a fit on the spot. Juliet suddenly remembered last year's annual party. Just because a female colleague toasted Jack with a glass of wine, she had smashed her own glass in front of everyone. At lunch with clients, the restaurant manager suddenly came over and whispered, "President, there's a Ms. waiting at the back door of the kitchen." I put down my napkin. "Call the police." 5 minutes later, the faint sound of sirens could be heard. One of the clients curiously asked what had happened. I smiled and raised my glass. Nothing important, just a minor nuisance. In the afternoon, back at the company, the receptionist handed me an envelope. That Ms. left this behind. Inside was a crumpled note. "I found a job at a milk tea shop in the west of the city. I will start over. I'm sorry." I casually tossed the note into the trash. Juliet stood behind the counter at the milk tea shop, mechanically repeating the motions of adding toppings, sealing cups, and sticking labels. "Order number 3, 1 large pearl milk tea." The manager urged impatiently. "What are you spacing out for?" She turned around in a panic, accidentally knocking over a bottle of syrup. Sticky liquid spread across the floor, just like her messy life. As she crouched down to wipe it, her phone slipped from her pocket. The screen lit up with a university group chat notification. Jack's company is about to go public. Valuation over $10 billion. Someone at her, "Juliet, if you hadn't screwed up back then, you'd be the $10 billion CEO's wife now." Syrup clung to her hands. No matter how she wiped, it wouldn't come off. That evening, when I got home, Helen was leaning against my door with 2 bottles of red wine at her feet. "Let's celebrate." She shook the bottles lightly. "I just poached an engineer from Google today." I opened the door and let her in. "Your intel is impressive." Of course. She casually found the corkscrew, like she'd done it 100 times before. "For example, I know your ex-girlfriend started working at a milk tea shop today." My hand paused while pouring the wine. "So concerned about her?" "I'm concerned about you." Helen looked straight into my eyes. "Jack, are you sure you've completely let go?" Outside, rain suddenly began to pour. I raised my glass to clink hers. "It's like this wine, once it's expired, the only thing left to do is pour it out." Helen smiled, her eyes bright. "Then, to rebirth." To rebirth. Late at night, Juliet dragged her exhausted body back to the shared apartment. Her roommate was watching the finance news, the host's excited voice blaring. "MT Technologies CEO Jack dined with venture capital queen Helen tonight," sparking rumors of a romantic relationship. She froze at the doorway, her eyes stinging as the screen showed Jack opening the car door for Helen. Once upon a time, that same gentleman had buckled her seatbelt with care. Now, he wouldn't even spare her a single glance. Outside, the rain poured down in torrents, but her tears had long since run dry. Chapter 12, Powerful Alliance. In the reception room, Juliet nervously adjusted her skirt. The business outfit had cost her 2,000 yuan, and she had even styled her hair the same way as when she first met Jack. She had made up her mind. Today she would start over as a job applicant. After all, she was a proper college graduate, and it was only because she accompanied Jack to endless social banquets that she had abandoned her career. The door opened, and she stood up abruptly. "Jack." Her smile froze on her face. Behind Jack walked a stranger, a woman who naturally hooked her arm through his. A diamond ring sparkled on her ring finger. "So this is Ms. Mu." Juliet Mu's lips began to tremble. "You are Helen," the woman smiled. "Jack's fiancée." I looked at Juliet's face, turning deathly pale in an instant, and suddenly felt bored. Security. 2 large men entered immediately to drag her away. Juliet struggled, shouting, "Jack, I really know I was wrong. Please, give me a chance." Helen suddenly stepped forward. "Ms. Mu." She pulled a business card from her bag. "I know some good psychiatric clinics. I suggest you go." After Juliet was dragged out, Helen removed the ring and tossed it to me. "Props yours again." I raised an eyebrow. "Nice acting. Where's my reward?" "Dinner." She tilted her head, thinking for a moment. "How about giving me that West Side project instead?" I burst out laughing. Juliet crouched in the fire escape behind the office building, her makeup ruined from crying. Her phone buzzed. It was the milk tea shop manager. "If you skip work again today, don't ever come back." She numbly wiped away her tears, then noticed a crumpled newspaper beside the trash can. On the finance page, a photo of Jack and Helen took up half the layout. The headline blinding: "Powerful Alliance. MT Technology and Venture Capital Queen form strategic partnership." What crushed her most was the small print. Reportedly, the 2 are university alumni, having known each other for many years. "Many years," Juliet muttered. So while she was still basking in the vanity of being called baby by the campus heartthrob, Jack had already known a woman like this. At 10 in the evening, while I was still working overtime, Helen came in carrying late-night snacks. Your ex-girlfriend's working at the milk tea shop now. I didn't even lift my head. I heard she spilled milk tea 3 times and got scolded badly. I closed the file. What are you really trying to say? Helen pushed the plate of pan-fried buns toward me. I was just thinking, if the you of today met the her of back then, would you still have been together? Outside, neon lights flickered. I thought for a moment. No, why not? The threshold's higher now. I bit into a bun. After tasting Michelin, how could I ever go back to street food? Helen suddenly leaned closer, her finger brushing the corner of my lips. Got some sauce there. Her fingertips carried a faint scent of ink. At 2 in the morning, Juliet was counting supplies in the milk tea shop storeroom. Her phone lit up. It was a text from Jonathan. Baby, heard you got dumped. Want to grab a drink? She stared at the message for a long time, then suddenly grabbed a bag of milk tea powder and hurled it hard against the wall. White powder exploded everywhere, scattering through the air. The manager rushed in at the noise. Are you insane? That's coming out of your pay. Juliet slowly crouched down, staring at the mess all over the floor. She finally understood. Some mistakes in life can only be made once. Chapter 13, Boundless Horizons. 2 years later, a private yacht cut through the azure sea. Helen lay on the deck wearing sunglasses, swirling a glass of champagne in her hand. The board unanimously approved the merger. She tossed me the tablet. Now you're the undisputed leader of the industry. I glanced at the report and set it aside. That's the reason you dragged me out to sea. She took off her sunglasses, sunlight dancing on her lashes. No, it's because today is your birthday. I froze for a moment. Ever since my parents passed away, I had never celebrated a birthday. Like a magician, Helen pulled out a small box from behind her. Gift. Inside was a key, the key to the apartment across from mine. So you don't have to peek at me from your window every day, she said lightly. Though her ears flushed pink, I ran my fingers over the key, suddenly remembering the email I had received that morning. Juliet's uncle had begged me to invest in his failing supermarket. Attached was her resume. What are you thinking about? Helen asked. I tossed the key into the sea. As she stared at me in shock, I pulled another key from my pocket. Bought it last month already. Helen burst out laughing, her laughter carried away by the sea breeze and scattered into the waves. As night fell, Helen and I sat on the deck, watching the stars. She suddenly asked, if Juliet hadn't. There's no if. I cut her off. Just like you would never tolerate anyone calling you baby. Helen chuckled. Do you know why I admire you? Because I'm handsome. Because you have boundaries. She lifted her glass, draining the champagne. And boundaries are the sexiest thing. I leaned in to kiss her, the faint bitterness of champagne sweet between our lips. In the supermarket storage room, Juliet crouched on the floor, counting expired cans. Sweat soaked her cheap uniform as the manager's sharp voice rang in her ears. Hurry up. Don't you know how to organize the shelves? How could there be so many expired products? Are you that stupid? Can't even do this right? Her phone buzzed. A blind date had messaged. My mom says the dowry will be at most $88,000. Take it or leave it. She numbly switched off the screen and suddenly noticed a rain-soaked newspaper in the corner. Jack and Helen's photo on the yacht covered an entire page. The headline read, Tech Rising Star and Venture Capital Queen, a Powerful Love Alliance. In the photo, Jack's smile was one she had never seen before, completely relaxed. What are you spacing out for? The manager kicked over a box. Move these outside. Juliet staggered to lift the box the moment she pushed open the back door. Blinding sunlight poured in. Across the street, a massive LED screen was broadcasting Jack's company's annual gala. After closing time, Juliet walked home alone. Passing the cinema, she saw a huge poster advertising Jack's company's holographic technology. In front of it, a young couple was quarreling. Why did you let your ex like your posts on social media? It's just a like. Why are you overreacting? The girl's voice trembled with fury. Boundaries in a relationship are like teeth. Bite once, and you'll know whether it's worth keeping. Juliet stood frozen. The night wind carried a song drifting out from the theater. We're all in the sea. I feel like we're sand. Baby Juliet. A disgusting, all too familiar voice suddenly rang out. Jonathan stood at the corner of the street, leaning on a crutch. Once the handsome campus star, he now looked hunched and broken, like a stray dog. He was grinning at Juliet. Get lost. Juliet walked away without looking back. Jonathan was left standing there awkwardly, frozen in place. Morning sunlight streamed in through the porthole. Helen was still asleep. My phone lit up. It was a message from my assistant, President. Juliet resigned from the milk tea shop last night. She's reportedly gone to a small southern town. I deleted the message and quietly opened the drawer. Inside lay the engagement ring Juliet had once returned to me. Helen stirred drowsily, turning over. What time is it? Still early. I tossed the ring into the sea, kissed her forehead, and whispered, go back to sleep. Outside, the sea and sky blended into one, cloudless and infinite. 3 months later, a small southern town. Juliet stood behind the counter of a convenience store, rain drizzling outside the window. On the TV, financial news played. MT Technology announces alliance with Sioux Capital. Market value surpasses 1 trillion. She calmly wiped the counter and turned to restock the shelves. When the first ray of sunlight pierced through the clouds, the store bell rang crisply. "Welcome," she said without turning her head. From then on, no one ever heard from her again.